Magnus Carlsen, former world champion and one of the best endgame players in the world, lost his cool after a devastating blunder.
Oh my god!
He was so confident before the match that he even tweeted this. But how did all of this actually happen? Hi, I'm Chess Mode, and today we will take a look at the drama around the Norway Chess tournament, which is one of the most known tournaments of the year. We have many grandmasters here, like the current world champion Gukesh from India, who is only 19 years old. He faced Magnus Carlsen in this heavily anticipated match, and what seemed to be a normal chess game at first quickly turned out to be a really big spectacle. So let's see how all this turned out. So they played the Spanish opening, and Magnus with the black pieces actually played really well. As you will see, he kept pressing Gukesh, and he even managed to get a lot of pressure on this e4 pawn here. You can see that he is attacking it with the knight and with the rook, and also this bishop here will come to d3 and also attack this pawn. Now look at this brilliant play by Magnus. He played g6, just limiting this knight so it can't jump to this nice f5 square. Now after king to h1 and bishop to a6, Gukesh played a pretty dubious move, which was queen to a2. Now it attacks the pawn, on a5, but it really just allows this move bishop to d3, putting even more pressure here on this e4 pawn. So that's pretty nice for Magnus. Now Gukesh played knight to d2, just protecting the pawn on e4, and after h5, which is by the way another really nice move, Magnus wants to play h4 and just basically removing the knight from defending the pawn. So after this, after the knight moves, he can just take the pawn, and after he takes the pawn on e4, also the d5 pawn is going to be in danger because it's no longer protected by another pawn, after which these two pawns in the center are going to be very strong. So Magnus's play was really nice here, and Gukesh had to do something. Of course, he took the pawn on a5, and after the queen exchange, Magnus played h4. Now like we said, if Gukesh moves the knight, this pawn is no longer enough protected, so Magnus is just going to win it. And he has really powerful knights here, and the d5 pawn is going to be weak, and also the b3 pawn. As you can see, we're going to play something like rook to b8, and it's a lot of trouble for Gukesh. So that's why he didn't move the knight here from g3 and played rook to a4. Now this seems a bit weird, because it seems like we can just take the rook and then take the knight and we're a piece up. But Gukesh had a really nice idea. He basically wanted to recapture the pawn which attacks the knight, and if the knight moves, then this bishop is unprotected. So one of these pieces is going to fall now. Now this was a really nice idea from Gukesh, which prevents Magnus from taking the knight on g3. So what did Magnus do? He played rook to b8, reinforcing his rook here on b4. Now rook to a2 and king to g7. Magnus is not in a hurry because, what is Gukesh going to do? All his pieces can't move because they're basically fixed here on this pawn. So if he moves any pieces, the pawns are going to fall. That's why Gukesh just activated with rook to a7 and now rook to d4. After knight to f3, we have a really complicated position where the rook is attacked, this knight is attacked, but again, like we said, if we take it back, these two pieces are going to be attacked, so it's a really complicated position. So Magnus just took the knight here on g3, and after Gukesh recaptured, this knight is attacked, this rook is attacked by the knight, and also this bishop is in some danger, so he's gonna lose something, of course. So he played knight takes h3, and now after Gukesh recaptured, he just took the pawn on e4, basically taking advantage of this pin because the rook is not attacked anymore. Now after Gukesh moved the king, the rook is attacked, of course, and Magnus had to move it. After g4, the idea was g5, of course, attacking the knight, and if it moves, then this bishop will fall. So Magnus had to do something, and he took the pawn on d5. And after the exchange, Magnus had a really nice position with two central pawns, and also the option of going here with the knight to this nice f4 square. So Gukesh moved his rook to c2, and after king to f6, h4. Now the idea for Gukesh is to play knight to g5. The point is of course to just checkmate the opponent's king, because it has no squares to go to. So that's why he had to do something, and Magnus played king to e6. Now knight to g5, king to d5, and you can see that this king is just running here in the middle of the board, which is pretty unusual. So here rook to a5 check, king to d4, rook to a4 check, king to d3. The king went from g7 all the way here to d3, which is absolutely crazy. Now rook to f2, a really nice move. Gukesh basically wants to play rook to f3 check, and after the king goes here, he wants to play rook to a2 check, and this king is going to be in a lot of trouble with a lot of different checkmate ideas in the air. So f6 attacking the knight, and now rook to f3 check, king to e2, and rook to a2 check. Like we said, Gukesh is just doing as planned. Now guys, pause the video here and try to figure out what happens if Magnus went to this e1 square. Now Magnus didn't go to e1 with the king, but played rook to d2. And after the exchange of rooks, Gukesh played knight to e4 check. And after king to e2, king to g3 of course. And now Gukesh is attacking two pawns at once, and it's a bit hard to protect both, you know. So that's why Magnus played d5, sacrificing the pawn on f6, and now the material is even. Black is still better because of these pawns here in the center, which could be really dangerous, but his king is a bit questionable here, you know, so that's why it's still an interesting game and it's not just over for Gukesh. Now here Magnus played rook to f8, attacking the knight, and after rook to f2 check, the king moved to e1. And now we will see some tactics. Action. Knight to d7, knight e2 check, rook takes e2, king takes e2, knight takes on f8, d4, knight to e6, d3, knight to c5, king to e3, knight to a4, e4, h5, g takes h5, g takes h5, king to d2, knight to b2, e3, knight to c4 check, king to e2, and king to f4. Knight to d7, knight to e2 check. And as you can probably see here, the engine evaluation just went crazy. The only thing white can basically do is to take the knight here. And after the king recaptures it, he takes the rook. And Gukesh is a knight up in this position. But the problem is that black has these two strong pawns and just wants to run them up the board and queen. So this was Magnus's plan, and he thought that this knight couldn't stop these pawns. But let's see what exactly happened. Magnus played d4, and after knight e6 desperately going back, d3, knight to c5, and we can see the trick now. If black played d2, Gukesh has knight to e4, which is a really nice move, because if you promote to a queen, we have knight to c3 check, and he's gonna lose his queen. Basically, we take the queen and we move closer with the king. We're gonna defend this pawn and just move this pawn further here and just win the game. So that's why here Magnus played king to e3, but he missed this crucial move, knight to a4. Now the knight is going to b2, which is a crazy good square because it protects the promotion square here, and it's really hard for the king to attack this knight. He has to lose a lot of moves with the king to try to attack this knight, and meanwhile we're gonna push our pawn here and just promote to a queen. So this is a problem for Magnus. Let's see what he did. He played e4 and now h5. Of course, we don't waste any time. Gukesh is just pushing his pawns. Magnus played king to d2 and of course knight to b2. And after e3, Gukesh gave a check on c4, and the only way to protect the pawn is to go king to e2, and now the winning move, king to f4. Now since this was a terrible loss for Magnus, let's just see what he had to say after the game.
I'm just wondering, like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point? But you know, I will do my best in the last 3 games here. Then we'll see, I suppose.
It must have felt frustrating to lose such a winning position, so it's understandable that he starts to question the point of playing classical chess. But now let's see what Gukesh had to say after the game.
Gukesh, can I just quickly get your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. It was just chaos, but luckily it ended well.
Now Magnus may have lost a battle, but he didn't lose the war. He went on to win the Norway Chess tournament, proving that failure is only a stepping stone in a path to success. But the main takeaway is that even the greatest chess players like Magnus Carlsen can make blunders under time pressure, and that's totally normal. After all, we all make mistakes, and that's what makes us human. When was the last time you made a mistake that made you react in a way that Magnus did? Comment down below, and while you're there, please consider liking and subscribing if you like these breakdowns and fun chess videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.